Kia ora everybody, great to be here at EV City, an opportunity to highlight one of the government's most successful climate change initiatives. The Clean Car Discount has done more to reduce our emissions than almost any other initiative in recent history. It's one that we are incredibly proud of. As a result of the Clean Car Discount, we've seen in the most recent year over half of the new vehicles registered in New Zealand either being electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. That is great news for New Zealand overall. It's certainly good news for the people who are buying those vehicles, but in time it's also good for the second-hand vehicle market, because as we can see here, the Clean Car Discount is significantly increasing overall supply of electric capable vehicles in New Zealand. That will be great news for the second-hand market in the years to come as well. That's going to have a big impact on our climate emissions. It's also going to have a really positive impact on household budgets, because as you will have seen here today, it's a lot cheaper to charge an electric vehicle than it is to fill up a combustion engine powered vehicle with a tank of petrol. So I want to thank the Christchurch team for having me here today. It's been a fantastic visit today. You need trust and integrity to be Prime Minister. A leader with integrity would not take $2,000 away from our most vulnerable children in their first term to give it to wealthy landlords. A leader with integrity wouldn't be trying to cover up that he wants to give 300 mega landlords a tax break worth more than $1 million each. We already know that the National Party's tax plan is a scam, with almost no one in New Zealand getting the $250 a fortnight that the National Party has been boasting about. They've misled people for weeks, and I think New Zealanders have cottoned on to that. Labour is seeing a late surge in support in this campaign, because I think New Zealanders can see what's at stake, and they know that National has been trying to pull the wool over their eyes. New Zealanders don't like the trickery, and they don't like the evasion that they have been seeing from Christopher Luxon and the National Party. Labour's got a positive vision for New Zealand. It doesn't mean irreversible cuts to our essential public services or screwing the scrum in favour of people who don't need it. It's crystal clear that a vote for National, ACT or New Zealand First puts everything at risk, because if they win, New Zealanders will lose. So my message is very clear, and it is this: if you're undecided and you care about child poverty, you care about climate change, you care about our essential public services like health and education, if you want to make sure we continue the momentum that we have built up in recent years in fixing the housing crisis by building more houses, then I'm asking you to give your party vote to Labour. At this election, values matters. I've been very happy to talk about my values. I've set out very clearly what the Labour Party stands for. I've set out who we will work with and who we won't work with. I've set out clearly the commitments that I am putting before the electorate, and I stand behind all of those. I'm very optimistic about New Zealand's future. I think we have a great future ahead of us as a country. I think we've got some great momentum. We need to keep that momentum going, and in order for that to happen, I'm asking New Zealanders to give their party vote to Labour.
You talk about it.
Have you left it is it too little, too late?
No, absolutely not. The vast majority of New Zealanders still haven't voted yet.
We've seen today that the National Party is saying that the CTU's analysis of the landlord millionaires that their policies would make, they've slammed that as another CTU hit job. What do you make of that?
Well, I notice that they're not producing any evidence to demonstrate that it's wrong. And in fact, when Christopher Luxon was repeatedly asked questions about this morning, he continued to dodge them, because the reality is he knows that it's true. He knows that he is going to put thousands more children in poverty in order to give mega landlords millions of dollars in tax breaks.
You talked about the National Party's being honest about its cuts to benefits?
Absolutely not. The facts are absolutely clear. To take $2 billion out of benefits during a cost of living crisis is recklessly irresponsible. To give that money to landlords who will benefit by millions of dollars, I think that just shows the National Party's priorities are so wrong.
You've seen a
surge in support, or lift in support in the latest poll that came out this morning, but you still have no path to power. Will you reconsider your call not to work with Luxon?
We have a huge amount of momentum behind us, and I think that you're going to see in the coming days, as the majority of New Zealanders make up their minds how they're going to vote, our support is going to continue to increase.
So you don't think that, on election night we could see that you have no path to power other than to work with Winston?
I think the election result is going to surprise a lot of people. I think we've got huge momentum behind Labour as we head into the final days. As I've indicated, the majority of New Zealanders haven't voted yet. Many of them are still making up their minds how to vote. The next 72 hours is going to be critical for that.
Just for the record, though, still no Winston. There's absolutely no way that you would work with him.
I've made it very clear. Winston Peters won't be part of any government that I'm leading.
And in terms of that surge that you're talking about, we saw the Guardian poll put you up to about 30. Are your internal polls saying roughly the same thing?
Again, I don't want to. We don't release our internal polling results, but I can confirm that our numbers have been going up in our own internal polling as well.
What do you think the reason? What do you think the reason for that is? Is it because National made a strategic error when it came to Chris Bishop saying that they might force New Zealanders back to an election and people got spooked?
I think New Zealanders are seeing that the National Party has been trying to dupe them. I think New Zealanders are seeing that a National Act New Zealand First coalition would take New Zealand backwards. I think New Zealanders are seeing that the cost of National's tax cuts, which would benefit only a very small number of New Zealanders, would actually fall on the majority of New Zealanders. So I think Kiwis realise very few people benefit from National's tax cuts, but everyone will pay for them.
Do your internal polls show that Labour's in the 30s?
What's that? As I said, I don't release our internal polling.
You don't need to give a specific
I'm not going to. I'm not going to release our internal polling.
The decline in support for National Act seems to be going to New Zealand First, though, not to Labour. Why do you think that is?
Look, I reject that. I think we've got real momentum behind the Labour campaign.
Why is your bowel cancer promise not in your manifesto?
Well, we've made a bowel cancer promise. I think we made it after we'd. Oh, you're talking about the one that in the News Hub Leaders debate. I think because the manifesto had already been released at that point.
And is that the same with your fizzy drinks ban? Where's your promise in writing to do that?
Yeah, they were commitments that I have made. I will absolutely honour those commitments.
And we've seen most of the criticism and the work behind sort of unpicking National's numbers come from the CTU and not the Labour Party. Has the Labour Party been slow to criticise and critique your opposition's policies?
I think you will have heard me. Some of you have been complaining about it. I've been critiquing their policies every day over the last few weeks.
We're doing a real work into what those policies would mean. We've seen most of that come from the CTU as opposed to Labour Party.
Oh, look, I welcome independent scrutiny of the National Party's plans. We've been giving them plenty of scrutiny as well.
And we've seen today that Jacinda Ardern has come out with her video of support. Are you confident that that is a help and not a hindrance?
I think it's absolutely a help. I know Jacinda cares really passionately about the issues that she was talking about this morning around child poverty, around climate change, and I think, like so many other New Zealanders, Jacinda knows that the progress we've made in those areas would be at risk if there's a change of government.
Did you ask her to do it, or did she volunteer to do it?
She volunteered.
We did see towards the end of her tenure that her popularity was starting to turn on her. So was the strategy for her to do that video more of a instead of perhaps persuading the undecideds, more of a rallying of the base?
I think it's an indication that we're getting to that point where people are making up their minds how they're going to vote, and we want to ensure that when people do make up their mind, that they're voting for us and that they are actually going to vote.
Was she recently an undecided?
No, but Jacinda is reaching other voters, Amelia.
Is Labour worried about losing the East Coast seat?
In fact, she's already voted.
Just a point made to me. That News Hub debate was 5 days before your manifesto was released. Could you not have tweaked it to include your promise?
I think we'd already locked it all in, but I will absolutely honour the commitments that we've made around bowel cancer and around fizzy drinks in schools.
Is Labour worried about losing the East Coast seat?
Tamati Coffee is running an absolutely outstanding campaign there. It is a seat that National held up until very recently, but we're running a vigorous campaign, and I'm backing Tamati to win it.
Did you know that he was meeting up with Elizabeth Kerekere and asking people online to forget about the Green Party candidate and to support him instead?
Former politicians endorse, people standing for elected office all of the time. Just a few weeks ago, we saw Paula Bennett endorsing Brooke Van Velden for the Tamaki seat. So what former politicians do with their endorsement is up to them.
I think it's a bit weird for Elizabeth Kerekere, who quit the party and had bullying allegations made against her, to be speaking on behalf of the Green Party to support Tamati.
She's entitled to say whatever she wants.
Last night we saw... Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, you're here. Thank you. You're here in Christchurch today. I just wondered what policies Labour is offering specifically specifically to the people of Christchurch?
Yeah, so we've got about an infrastructure investment pipeline here in Christchurch of about $4 billion. So if we look at the work that we're doing around road transport, for example, we've got some specific commitments in the draft government policy statement around road transport here. We've also got the commitment that we've made to mass rapid transit in Canterbury, and we want to see that one through. So we want to make sure with these big projects like mass rapid transit, there is a process that you have to go through. We want to make sure that that project has a green light at every one of the hurdles, and it has so far, and we want to continue that going. We've almost completed, and we're absolutely committed to seeing through to completion big rebuild works around Canterbury schools. I oversaw that as Minister of Education, and we want to see the last of those schools get their rebuilds. In terms of the health system, you've seen big rebuild of health facilities here, and we want to make sure again that we're seeing those through to conclusion. In terms of public housing, over 2,000 additional public houses have been added in the last 6 years, and there's another 1,000 in the pipeline. So we want, and the announcement that we have made as part of this campaign will actually continue that and take that number even higher. So these are all things that will benefit Canterbury. And then if you look at some of the commitments that we're making to the whole country, there will be tens of thousands of young Cantabrians who would benefit from free dental care. Every household in the Christchurch area would benefit from GST being removed off fruit and vegetables.
We probably need to move on from national policies because I let Christopher Luxon go on for a little bit about that, and then I went in. But can I ask you, you talk about green lights. Do you endorse the Greens' idea to take away the tunnelling for some light rail in Auckland to pay for public transport in Wellington and Christchurch?
What we have said, first of all, we haven't agreed a final approach for light rail in Auckland, whether it's overground or underground. That's part of the business case work that's actually working out what the most effective option for Auckland's going to be. So there's no money earmarked for that at the moment anyway, because it hasn't got to that point. What we've made a commitment to here in Christchurch is mass rapid transit. Now that is most likely to be one of two things, either a dedicated bus circuit or light rail, and both of those options are still on the table.
Last night at the press...
And that would be in the 24 to 27 land transport plan.
Last night,
the East Coast seat, the fact that Tamati's posting on social media asking people not to vote for the Green candidate, do you think that's a sign that he is nervous that he's going to lose that seat for Labour?
The East Coast was always going to be a very tight race. If you look at the history of that seat, it's for all of the last 20 years, bar the last 3, it's been held by National. So I think Tamati's running a very vigorous campaign. Anyone who wants to endorse him is welcome to do that.
Last night in the minor parties leader debate, Marama Davidson said that she would favour making Hamas a terror entity, but she also suggested the Israeli Defence Force should be looked at by the government as well. What do you think of these comments?
Totally disagree with the latter part of that. We have designated the military wing of Hamas as a terrorist organisation. At the time that we did that, so that was done under the Key government, most other countries around the world were similarly restricting the terrorist designation to their military wing. Subsequent to that, some other countries, including some that we're very close with, have designated the political wing of Hamas as a terrorist organisation. So I've asked for advice, which will go to the next government after the election, whether it's us or the other side. They will get a terrorist assessment on whether that designation should also be extended to the political wing of Hamas as well. But there is no question, we've not asked for that assessment to be done on the Israeli military. I don't agree with that characterisation.
Why don't you agree? Why don't you agree with that? Why?
I think the Israeli military, the Israeli Defence Force, are defending themselves from a very unjustified attack.
But what changed your mind?
When did you use?
What's that?
Over years?
Look, as I've indicated, I haven't seen any. I'm certainly not asking for that assessment to be done.
What changed? What changed over the last couple of days to make you reconsider the political wing as wanting to potentially classify them as a terror entity?
I think it's probably something that should be done anyway. But clearly, the unprovoked and unjustified attack in the last few days. Sorry, my throat's a bit dry. It clearly means that we should have a close look at that again.
So you asked for that advice after the...
Yeah, in the last 72 hours, yeah.
It's clearly a really strongly held view for Marama Davidson, but it's a strongly held view that you strongly disagree with. How are you going to get on if you are able to form a government if you can't even agree on what should be a terrorist entity?
I absolutely don't agree with that characterisation. First of all, on issues around national security, there has by and large been a bipartisan political consensus between the two major parties in the New Zealand Parliament, Labour and National, over a long period of time. The Green Party and other parties, including the ACT Party, have often taken views that are different to those. I don't see the bipartisan consensus that we have around these matters between Labour and National changing anytime soon.
But isn't it an issue that it's not bipartisan between potential governing partners?
No, we've worked with the Greens previously and they have often taken a different view on international issues, as the ACT Party have taken a different view on international issues to what the National Party have taken, and the government has still continued to function very effectively on the international stage.
Last night we also saw David Seymour describe the partnership between National and ACT as a marriage. I mean, what you make of his comments, and with New Zealand First potentially, I don't know, in the wardrobe there, how does that all fit?
There's an image that I really didn't need. Look, the reality is a coalition between National ACT and New Zealand First would be shambolic. The fact that David Seymour and Winston Peters continue to try and one-up each other as to who could bring the greatest degree of chaos to government, I think should be an alarm bell for all New Zealanders. It wouldn't be a stable government. It would take New Zealand backwards. It would mean more children living in poverty. It would mean running down of our public services. And on a regular basis, it would mean government grinding to a halt because they wouldn't be able to agree on anything.
What metaphor would you use to describe a Labour Party, Green Party, Party Māori?
A constructive and professional working relationship.
If we're going for a marriage metaphor, what would you?
I wouldn't use a metaphor. I'd just say it'd be a constructive and positive working relationship.
Okay, on the vigorous campaign that you say Labour has been running, do you think it's been an honest campaign?
Yes, I do.
Here, up to?
No, absolutely not. Because actually the vast bulk of people who will benefit from it will only be seeking basic dental care.
What about some of the ads that some of your MPs, well not ads, but some of the posts that they've been putting out around National scrapping or saying that they're going to be increasing the superannuation age to 67? Those posts have now been deleted.
Well, the National Party are proposing to increase the superannuation age to 67.
Yeah, but not for a number of years. It's a bit disingenuous to paint it as as soon as they get into government, they're going to be increasing it.
Well, for a lot of New Zealanders, the National Party's increase to the age of eligibility for superannuation will mean that they're waiting another 2 years to get it.
But surely it's some...
People who are in their 60s.
Then the National Party can explain their own policy.
But surely if Labour, I mean, if you don't get into government, but maybe you do another time, will you actually have to look at putting the superannuation age up?
No, we think that we can sustain the age of eligibility at 65. I think, having previously looked at it, and previously, under a previous, Labour leadership, supported increasing the age, one of the things that was a real eye-opener for me was meeting with people who would be affected by that and realising the huge inequity that would create. So I'm committed to keeping the age at 65 because I actually think that's fairer. You would actually penalise a lot of New Zealanders, particularly some of our lowest income New Zealanders, if you increase the age of eligibility for superannuation to the point where some wouldn't benefit from it at all. And I don't think that would be fair or equitable.
How forward-looking is that, though? At some point in the next couple of decades, or are you planning to sort of, for the next few decades, always being 65, or is there at some point that we may need to move to a TPC model?
If we continue to make contributions to the New Zealand Superannuation Fund, which our government has been, we believe that we can sustain the age of eligibility at 65. But it is a question of priorities. If you're giving tax breaks to landlords and cutting benefits, then that clearly suggests that your priorities are not average, ordinary, everyday working New Zealanders.
How concerning was it at the food bank before? They're saying that the rising cost of living, the rising cost of employment means that it's harder to deliver food to people who can't afford it. What can be done there?
I think it's always really good to touch base with those community organisations to see what it is that they're dealing with so that we can, see, what the challenges are that they're encountering. I think what we saw there is a really good example of how a partnership approach between government and community organisations can make a big difference. We talked about the transitional housing, for example, that they have and the wraparound support that they're able to provide some very vulnerable New Zealanders. We're committed to that ongoing partnership approach with the non-government sector to make sure that our most vulnerable families are supported, that for people who have significant challenges that they're facing in life, that we're providing that kind of wraparound support that they need.
In the last few months, they said it's getting harder. Meanwhile, you've been campaigning, and it seems to just be getting worse.
Of course, inflation has been a persistent challenge. You will have heard them comparing New Zealand to the rest of the world and saying that actually the challenges that they are seeing, they're also seeing around the rest of the world. Getting inflation back down, which our government is absolutely committed to doing, is one of the best ways that we can support New Zealanders through that. I would note that the Treasury and the Reserve Bank are forecasting inflation to be back within the target range sometime in the second half of next year. I would also note that most economists predict that the National Party tax plan, that very few New Zealanders would gain the maximum benefit from, but every New Zealander would pay for, would actually result in inflation being higher for longer. That means interest rates also being higher for longer.
On Israel and Palestine, in recent history, New Zealand's taken quite a strong stance against settlements built in Palestine by Israel, UN resolutions, and also has shown, greater recognition for Palestine. Do you see this, what's happened recently, as changing the nature of the relationship?
I think in time we'll have an opportunity to digest what's happened and consider whether New Zealand's foreign policy stance in any way needs to change here. I don't think that we should do that 3 days before a New Zealand general election. I think that is something that we would do calmly and in a more considered fashion after an election. Yeah. Okay, thanks all.
Andrew, 21 minutes. My apologies.